Hey guys, this is Steve Huff from SteveHuffPhoto.com, and today I want to talk a little bit about this guy right here. Can you see it? I can see it. It's the Fuji X-H1, the newest Fuji, and I gotta tell you, I've used and tested mostly every Fuji made since they started releasing digital cameras. Remember the old S2 Pro, the S3 Pro, S5 Pro, then the X100, and so forth. Now, I used to love my S5 Pro. I loved my S2 Pro, but the S5 Pro, I really loved back in the day for its color, and that is what Fuji is known for. Bottom line, end of story. They're known with their digital cameras and their film for their colors. Fuji colors are loved by many and disliked by few, I think. I've always loved the Fuji blues and the Fuji yellows, and they just have a signature about them. And what I like about their digital cameras, what I like about their digital cameras is the fact that they have so many of their film profiles now. Provia, Velvia, Eterna for video now, Acros, I think that's how you say it, Acros for black and white. Classic Chrome, I love the Classic Chrome preset in this guy right here. Now the X-H1 is a different beast of a camera in my opinion from Fuji. Before I go into it, I want to talk a little bit about my history with Fuji cameras, the cameras I liked and the cameras I didn't really care for that much. The X100, the original, before they went to the X-Trans sensor, which I feel has now matured in the X-T2 and the X-H1 and so forth. But the first X100, I loved it. As quirky as it was, as slow as it was in operation, that autofocus was slow. It had charm because back then there were not many cameras released that looked like a Leica, right? The X100 had that style, that vintage charm that made everybody go gaga goo goo over it, including me. And the color reproduction was beautiful. I can still see some of the images in my head that I shot with that X100. I took it with me everywhere. I then bought the black edition when it came out because I loved that camera. It was so much cheaper than buying a Leica, and while not a Leica in any sense of the word, it gave you a little bit of that flavor, that taste of the having something special and unique, right? That EVF that you can go to live view or use their quasi rangefinder system. It was beautiful. So then you move up to the future generations of the X100. They got faster, better construction with the buttons. The image quality, in my opinion, got a little flatter in the later releases. And I was turned off of the X-Trans sensor a little bit in the early days, especially when you would get that mushiness to the sensor, because I use Adobe products and I didn't really feel like switching to an all new software just to process files from one of the cameras I owned. So I got turned off from the earlier X-Trans sensors. Now, before you say, oh, you're dumb, Steve Huff, for not liking those sensors, I have my reasons, and I will tell you that the latest version of that sensor that's in this camera, and I believe the X-T2, I have no problems with. It's beautiful. So I reviewed the X Pro 1. I liked it, but I didn't love it because it was clunky, it was slow, the AF was inaccurate. I think and felt at the time it was more like a beta product. I didn't like the auto white balance. I didn't like the feel of it. It was hollow feeling and awkward. So when the X Pro 2 came out, I handled it, I didn't care for it, and I let someone else review it from my website. So as time went on, the X-T1 came out. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a step in the right direction. It looked great, it felt great, the controls were great. And then the X-T2 was even better. So that leads me now to the X-H1. I saw this at WPPI and I picked it up and I was like, wow, that's pretty hefty feeling for a Fuji. I normally felt like Fuji cameras felt hollow and light, and that was one of my complaints, even though it shouldn't have been, because it doesn't mean that it's bad construction. it just gives you kind of a mental thing of like, was this camera built well? It feels so light. But this one gives you that heft. This one is a pro build body, in my opinion. It's weather sealed. It's blocky. I call it blocky. Actually, I think I named this body Blockhead. And that's not a negative terminology that I'm using here. I mean it in a charming way. It's blocky, it's different. It's not fat and round like most DSLRs. It's not thin and skinny like a rangefinder. It's not like an XT1 or 2. It's more blocky and thick. And what I love about this camera, and this is the first Fuji that I've kind of fallen in love with since the original X100. And I'll try to explain why that is. First of all, I love the all manual controls that are on this camera. Come on, focus, there we go. I love the manual controls and dials. That's something you don't see on a Sony. Now I'm shooting this with my Sony, with a Zeiss 18 f2.8 Batiste. That's what I use for these videos now. The Sony, it's an A7R III with the Zeiss Batiste 18mm. Now, in comparison to something like a Sony A7 III, which this will compete directly against, the Sony's about $2,000, this is about $1,900. The Sony's full frame, this is APS-C. The Sony doesn't have all these nice external controls. They're more, you can program buttons. It just doesn't have that old school vibe like the Fuji does. The EVF, they're about the same. I give the color in the EVF of the Fuji the edge. So if I was to compare the EVF, I'm sorry, mistake. I'm talking about the A7R III. The EVFs are about the same with the color edge going to Fuji. If you go to the A7 III, the Fuji EVF beats out the A7 III for clarity and color and everything. The EVF in this Fuji is fantastic. It's remarkable. It's about as close as I've come to the Leica SL yet in clarity and color. I really, really like it. You have your 3-inch LCD on the back that slides out like so. It doesn't slide out to the side or anything. So it's your normal traditional swivel LCD. The buttons, you have your joystick on the back, all your normal buttons, and they feel solid. I remember back in a time when Fuji cameras, the buttons felt a little cheap. They've definitely come a long way. I love, love, love the display on top that gives you a quick glance at your settings, as you can see right there. But you can see it's a pretty big camera. It's just about DSLR sized, but it's not as fat as a DSLR. Also, I enjoy the grip. It allows all my fingers to fit, okay? When I hold the Sony, my pinky hangs down and I have nowhere to put it because it's not as tall. So right now I have the 23 f1.4 lens on. It's a beautiful lens as far as image quality goes, but focusing, it's a little ratchety and noisy, like I remember the older Fuji lenses, like the 35-1.4. So it's not really a lens suited to video, because when it focuses, it's like, and it gives you that little ratchety sound. Where something like the 16-55 zoom here is beautiful, great for movies, and this is a hefty lens. As a matter of fact, this is a 24-70 equivalent, and it's up there in quality. It's really, really, really nice. You can't go wrong with an X-H1 and the 16-55. You're going to get brilliant color, sharpness, the whole package. It's an f2.8 lens. So this Fuji X-H1, as I said, is the first Fuji I'm truly, really, really loving since that original X100. The sensor has matured, the image quality is fantastic, the lens choice today is beautiful. Fuji makes some great, great lenses, and the color out of this thing is just remarkable. And to be honest, I mean, you know, there's a lot of photographers out there who only shoot raw, right? Now, I shoot raw all the time. Whenever I shoot with a camera, I shoot JPEG raw. And 99% of the time, I use that raw file. With this camera, it's one of the first that I enjoy shooting JPEG with. I just slap on a color profile. Classic Chrome is beautiful. and I just shoot, and I love the results right out of the camera so much that I don't really tinker with them or even post-process or do much with them at all. The color performance of this sensor is truly remarkable. Now, would I get an A7 III or the Fuji X-H1, seeing that they're the same price? One is full frame, one is APS-C, the Sony's full frame. The Sony has much better battery life than the Fuji. They both have five-axis image stabilization, but no one does that better than Olympus. Than Sony's 5-axis implementation, I never really like, to be honest. I never notice it. I never see any really stabilization with the Sony. It's almost like it's not there. With this, I can see it. It performs, and it might have something to do with sensor size, because as I said, Olympus has the best implementation of that 5-axis image stabilization. They were the originators, by the way, Olympus. So this has the 5-axis image stabilization that works really well for low light scenarios. I'm guessing video. I haven't tried it with video yet. I'm about to do some of that today and tomorrow. But there's really nothing that's missing from this Fuji. The menu system is pretty easy to use. You have that joystick for your focus point, which is kind of mandatory these days. People love their joysticks or thumb pads or whatever you want to call them. You have every control at your fingertips. As far as low light, this is close in performance to the A7R III that I'm filming this with in low light. The Sony ekes it out, especially at the extremes, like past ISO 10,000, say. The Sony totally gets better than the Fuji, but up to that, the Fuji holds its own and does really, really well. So Fuji has improved the performance. Speed-wise, this camera is very fast to focus. Fuji, again, I remember the old early days, their focusing was slow and sluggish, like they couldn't figure it out. With this camera, they figured it out. It's fast, it's speedy, and again, it just feels solid. This is a pro spec camera. You can use this for professional work, just as you can the X-T2, X-T1, X Pro 2. But this is kind of like, to me, a different class of camera from Fuji. It's almost like a mini GFX. It almost looks and feels similar, just in a smaller package. Fuji has come a long way in all areas, from build quality, to speed and response, to autofocus speed, to video, to image quality, and the features they give us with these color modes. And there's all kinds of other little things that I haven't even mentioned, because to be honest, I haven't used a Fuji extensively in quite a while. So I'm enjoying learning this camera, and to be honest, I'm considering buying one, even though I have way too many cameras, but I would have to ditch another system. Okay, and it's not going to be my Sony, and it's not going to be my Leica. It's not going to be the X1D. So I would have to ditch Olympus, which is what I have, and I have many Olympus bodies and lenses. And I'm not sure if I want to do that. I would probably miss the Olympus, but I've fallen for this camera. The color performance is stunning. The EVF is just beautiful, like right now, and it's just focusing right on my camera rig here. I don't have a memory card in it. And this is with the slower focusing lens. The 2314 is not a speed demon by any chance, but it focuses very fast on this camera. Battery life, I'm still on my original battery, and I'm not sure where I'm at with it, but I still have 3/4 of a battery, but I'm not a machine gun shooter, I'm not a chimper, so battery life seems decent. It's not going to be up there with the Sony, which is giving you incredible battery life. This has dual card slots. It has everything that one really needs. So before I end this video, I want to say that I highly recommend this camera, the Fuji X-H1, to those who want more of a photographer's camera. What I mean by that is the controls are external, right? You have external controls. You can set your ISO, you can set your exposure, you can set your focus modes right here, your metering modes right here. You don't have to go into a menu, and that is a beautiful thing. It's someone who wants a substantial, hefty feeling camera that inspires confidence. Someone who loves the Fuji colors. And while you don't have full frame or the best low light, that goes to Sony, you do have other things that kind of beat the Sony. The out of camera files in color win for me with the Fuji. The Sony wins, say we're talking about the A7 III, which is the same price point as this. The Sony will win in speed, continuous autofocus. The Sony will win being full frame. You're going to be able to get a shallower depth of field from your lenses if you want that. Sony has lenses made by many manufacturers that you can use, including Zeiss, which is what I'm filming this on, as I said. You can adapt old vintage lenses to your Sony and retain the full character of those lenses. You can shoot M lenses on the Sony and retain that full character. You can shoot M lenses on a Fuji, but I'd recommend just shooting Fuji lenses on the Fuji, because the Fuji lenses are indeed fantastic. They do know how to make lenses. So for me, I'm gonna tell you guys right now, to me, this is the best camera Fuji has made in 35mm, whatever, APS-C format. Better to me than the X-T1, X-T2, X-Pro 2, X-Pro 1, and so forth. This is a serious camera, and I have no complaints. The focus is just rock solid. Oh, I forgot. The shutter is amazing. Listen to this shutter sound, guys. Hold on, let me get it. It's just like butter. Here, hold on. Here we go. All right, after it locks, here we go. Listen, 1, 2. That shutter is the best shutter. It's addicting. I've never heard or felt a shutter like this. It's like a feather touch shutter, but it's so quiet and so gentle and just feels so good. This is my favorite shutter sound and feel of any camera I've ever shot, ever, including Leica M's and the Leica Film M's. This shutter is phenomenal. So all the way around, this Fuji is beautiful. It will give you the best of, you know, it's kind of a mix between, say, micro four thirds and full frame. It gives you more than micro four thirds. It gives you a little less than full frame, but it's pretty close. And you have that Fuji color, the opportunity to shoot JPEGs if you're out on vacation and get beautiful color back. Lenses such as the 16 to 55, f2.8, phenomenal, but heavy. This is heavy. Not as heavy as the Sony 24 to 70 G Master. You can see my review over at stevehufpphoto.com in words and images, and I have an ISO test there comparing the A7R III to the X-H1, and you can see how close they are. But thumbs up all the way for this Fuji. If you like this, thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.